Well, just a little bit ago, we made a video talking about the Calen Addison from Minnesota to San Jose trade, and how this was a great move. Well, the Wild have their answer, and it finally makes sense. The Minnesota Wild have acquired defenseman Zach Bogosian from the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for a 7th-round pick in 2025. So, essentially what the Wild are doing here is changing up their defense core for the better, or at least in their opinion, it is for the better. Let's go over to the entire situation here to understand why this is going down. Frank Seravalli goes out there and says this: the Wild complete their swap on defense in 2 separate trades. In comes Zach Bogosian and a 2026 5th-round pick. Out goes Calen Addison and a 2025 7th-round pick. So if you wanted to say just value for value, mano-a-mano, it's kind of equal, maybe even a bit more skewed in the Minnesota side because, of course, changing a 7th-round pick to a 5th-round pick is a pretty big upgrade, and you could say that for Calen Addison, a guy who was a power play specialist, who had some great puck-moving abilities in the offensive zone, but not really much of anything else, and getting a guy in Zach Bogosian instead, who is more of a defensive shutdown guy, this could be seen as a really big win for the Wild too. Now, we could talk about the Tampa Bay angle in a little bit here, but let's just go ahead and read Seravalli's own assessment. Power play specialist for a hard-nosed defender. Net cap change of $25,000 and 2 rounds higher in the draft. That is the deal. That is what Seravalli writes, and I think that's all that we have here. Yeah, okay, that's pretty much it. I also wanted to talk about what Michael Russo goes out there and says. This should be a simple transition for Zach Bogosian. He's buddies with Pat Maroon. By the way, that same Pat Maroon that is on the 2nd power play unit, as we had talked about in the last video. Of course, Bogosian lives in the Twin Cities, he skates with Wild players in the summer, and his brother Aaron works in the Wild's analytics department. So this is a pretty good acquisition for a guy in Zach Bogosian that has honestly started to play a lot better in Tampa Bay the past little while. Bogosian has had his ups and downs. He was in Winnipeg, he was in Buffalo, he was a Maple Leaf, and then went over to the Lightning, where he went out there and made a Stanley Cup Finals appearance. He made 2 straight Finals appearances pretty much for the Lightning, with a Toronto stint spliced in there too, so he's got a Stanley Cup to his name. I'm pretty sure that is right. Yeah, he's got a Stanley Cup from the 2019-20 Buffalo team. But the interesting thing about Bogosian is that you're, of course, not going to get any points out of this guy. I mean, Atlanta Thrashers, Winnipeg Jets, he had 30 points back in 2011-2012, but that's not really what you're getting Bogosian for. He's physical, he's defensively minded, he can make hits, and for a Tampa Bay Lightning team that was seeing Hayden Fleury come back from injury soon, there was not really going to be much playing time guaranteed for Bogosian anyway, so sending him over to a team like Minnesota that now has a more prominent and identified role for a guy like this in their bottom pairings makes a lot of sense. Of course, Zach Bogosian, if he does play on the power play, for example, taking over that Calen Addison 2nd unit spot, that's going to be interesting to see. But for the most part, because Calen Addison was such an inept defensive defender and only really good for creating offense, with the Wild not really looking towards him and his services on the power play anymore, it was kind of useless to have him on the team. So swapping him out for a guy like Zach Bogosian, it only costs you a 7th-round pick, which is totally fine because you gained a 5th-round pick in the earlier trade. This is okay, and I think that really the Wild have done a really tidy piece of business here. Like, Addison out, Bogosian in. The Tampa Bay Lightning were trying to get rid of this guy anyway because there wasn't really a fit with Hayden Fleury coming back. Bogosian's making $850,000, so that's a really movable contract. All in all, just a really good piece of work here, and it all makes sense for a Minnesota Wild team that is trying to remain competitive and that already has a bunch of Bogosian's buddies on the team. I mean, the guy lives in the Twin Cities, for crying out loud, so this makes sense, doesn't it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about this 2nd Minnesota Wild trade acquiring Zach Bogosian from the Tampa Bay Lightning? If you're a Lightning fan, let me know your thoughts as to how Bogosian has been playing for you late. I've been seeing a lot of things saying that he's been actually pretty solid the past few games here, so this should be a pretty seamless transition for the Minnesota Wild. But let me know your thoughts either way in the comment section below. How do you think about this 2nd trade? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.